This is a live mic check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Okay. Interesting group of guys.
On the air, okay.
All right.
Welcome to the October 2nd, 2019 Kennebunkport Planning Board meeting. First off, attendance. Ed said he could not make it. I'm not sure about Neil, but it doesn't look like he's here yet. So anyway, if that's still the case, you both vote.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
So, the approval of minutes. The the automatic spell correction will be fixed, so it no longer says PIER review when it meant PEER. We do a lot of peer reviews here, but this one was not.
Right.
So, anyway, beyond that, I didn't see anything else wrong.
I think Jonathan Trudeau, the spelling of his name is Trudo. Check that. But that's it. That's all I put.
Yeah.
Okay. So,
Make a
accept as
motion
noted.
to approve the minutes.
I'll second that.
Okay, all in favor?
Yeah.
Okay. Good.
Yep.
So, the first item on the agenda is item 190801, Apple Blossom Lane LLC, subdivision, Longview Partners LLC, authorized agent. This is a preliminary subdivision hearing, and this is the public hearing for that preliminary plan. So, Jim, go right ahead.
Thank you. I appreciate it, members of the board. As I might review with you, we were here last, I think it was September, no, it was 2 weeks ago, I'm sorry. And at that meeting, I think we satisfied the board that we had adequately provided documentation. I did have one gentleman down the way ask for a narrative project description.
Yes.
I have put that together, and it is in printed form. I did not get it submitted, unfortunately, for this meeting. However, if you'd like, I could read that into the record. It's a brief summary.
That's probably good. That's an easy way to handle it.
Okay. Apple Blossom Lane is an existing private way off of Goose Rocks Road and is part of a 7-lot subdivision approved for Fred Trudeau in 2008. At that time, Lot 7 was comprised of 23.36 acres, and it is where Jonathan Trudeau, who was Fred's son, constructed one single-family dwelling. Now, as the applicant, Apple Blossom LLC, Jonathan seeks to create 2 additional new lots, both of which will have frontage on Apple Blossom Lane. Original Lot 7, which was Town of Kennebunkport, tax map, I believe 12. We've got some misprints that suggest we called it tax map 15. I think Lisa Harmon has corrected us, and our future submittals will correct that. Town of Kennebunkport, tax map 12, block 2, lot 1J, is now proposed to be divided into lots 7A, B, and C as depicted on the amended plan by Frank Emery, professional land surveyor. I suspect that the town tax assessor's office will designate their own individual labels for those lots as they desire once it's approved. And then Apple Blossom Lane is intended to remain private, and houses will be protected from fire by sprinkler fire suppression systems in accordance with fire safety standards. Other than that, some very savvy board members picked up on the fact that the deed that we included didn't allow for further subdivision. So we have corrected that deed as well. And I will have a copy of a release of restricted covenants for the board as well.
I have a question on that. Do you need basically the okay of all the other lot owners to change that deed restriction?
I believe Jonathan maybe could speak to that, but our understanding,
Only the person that did the original deed.
We need you to.
Speak up there, please.
and I can read it to you so that it might further clarify.
Scott Emmons is redoing that for me, but my father had to release those conditions. It was just him that needed to sign
Oh,
and be aware of that.
I think he was the only holder. This
Yeah.
release states that Frederick G. Trudeau, an individual residing in the town of Kennebunkport and the state of Maine, and Jonathan Trudeau, also an individual in Kennebunkport and the state of Maine, holders of rights pursuant to certain covenants and restrictions as more particularly set forth in, and that's the reference to the old deed. So this would indicate that it's just Jonathan and his father.
except that did he make that deed specifically for that particular lot?
I believe that's the case.
Okay, because if he made it for the whole
No.
he didn't, okay. That was my question.
Yeah, and that, when you do the final subdivision
between-
plan, that you'll
absolutely.
have the already corrected deed in it presumably.
Right, this is a release of restrictive covenants. I'm assuming there is probably an action at the registry before final that will
Yes.
release
Which
that.
will be in the
over.
final,
Yep.
your final submission.
Yep.
Fine. But
So those were the two items, I think, that were dangling prior to, since the last meeting. And we will make those officially submitted to the record for
Okay.
for the final.
Good. Any questions from the board? Maybe on the one that just came out?
I have a couple of questions. Do we need, for this particular preliminary plan, MDP approval for the road extension?
I don't think we need it for the, for the preliminary. We'd need, any DEP permitting needs to be in place for the final.
Final
I
plan?
could speak to that as well. That's a timing issue, and we're about halfway through the 45-day submission time. So we would expect to have that in our hands prior to coming back for final.
Right, and they can't
As
come
you
back
may-
for at least 30 days after we say go with the final.
Yeah, so you should have it in hand by then.
The other item, Nina, that you brought up that we have not yet revised in the application, but will for the final, is the removal of the request for waiver for the trees, the specimen trees. And that's the first thing we're going to do tomorrow morning. We're going right out there to find those trees and get them on the plan. So that is.
Okay, well, I think we agreed that you don't have to find every tree.
No.
Just where you're going to do construction.
Correct, correct. We would identify only those within the area of the building windows. That's correct. But we
Right.
do anticipate doing that tomorrow and making that part of our next submission.
Now, I have a question about the actual address. Because basically on the well, first I have a question about the name of the subdivision, because you need a name. Is it going to be Apple Blossom LLC or Apple Blossom, or in accordance with 72D1, you need a name for the subdivision. So what is the actual name?
I was calling it Apple Blossom Lane.
Just Apple Blossom Lane?
Well, it's on the application.
On the application, it says
sheet, it
proposed
says,
Apple Blossom Estates
Right.
subdivision.
Oh, there you go.
yeah.
That's what it was. Yes, that was the official name that I decided
Blossom
you were going to
Estates.
call it.
Right here on the-
Oh, okay.
It was Apple Blossom Estates subdivision, and that is,
Well, we've done
we had a
Apple
brief,
Blossom
we had a brief
lot.
conversation. I don't know whether you remember that, Jonathan, in your driveway. Let
And
me refresh your memory.
my other question is, the actual address, is it really 83 Goose Rocks Road, or is it 20 Apple Blossom Lane? It's 20 Apple Blossom Lane, so that's, I should correct to that.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, that's what I was wondering. And you're not shoreland and resource protection. There is a provision under the preliminary plan for subdivisions that you identify historic sites or get a letter of waiver, and I haven't seen that. That's 72D29.
I've been all over this property. I don't think there's a historic site anywhere here. That's a official waiver request then we would make?
That's the question. Do we actually need an official waiver or an
I-
official letter from
Yeah, I don't,
Historical
my
Society?
experience till now is I haven't had to do that.
Article are we looking,
72D29, I think, in the subdivision regs. All areas within or adjacent to the proposed subdivision that are either listed on or eligible to be listed on the Natural Register of Historic Places or prehistoric sites noted on maps and so forth, are likely to.
That typical notification, I don't know whether this would be adequate or sufficient to sort of allay your concerns, but I know when we do a tier application with the DEP, part of that application, and I think if you dig deep enough in, or if we've included the tier, I may not have included the
No.
entire application. I do anticipate submitting at least the first page of the tier application. I don't know if you need all the supporting documentation. It's all very similar to what's already in the permit by rule. And it's already very similar to what's in your application. It just hasn't been repackaged as though for the DEP. But the DEP has a requirement for us to notify the Maine Historic Preservation Commission in Augusta with regard to our specific locations. They notify us if they have a record of any historic properties adjacent to or in the direct vicinity of the subdivision. We would hear back from them at that point and provide that additional documentation. So typically, with our tier applications, we get a response back from Historic Preservation that says we didn't find anything. So again, I would expect to have that in hand prior to coming back for a final with you folks. I don't know how to address this requirement for a preliminary, other than I don't have that response yet from DEP.
Well, one of the things we could say is that the DEP approval is pending and applicant expects to receive notification of, you know, that he's met 72D29.
Yep.
At that point. I think we
That-
could
that
leave
would be
it at
good.
that.
Yeah.
I am familiar with this board, and I know that we do have to have our DEP permits in hand prior to getting that final approval, so I would expect that.
Okay.
We would have to come back with that.
Right. Well, the only other thing I have is indication of a location of any open space to be preserved and a description of the proposed improvements and its management. You haven't asked for a waiver of that to be submitted perhaps with the final plan, but it
I
is.
thought by submitting a waiver request for open space that we've kind of addressed that, because we did ask for a waiver of open space. And I indicated that these lots are synonymous with the lots up in the front. These lots all have more open space individually. I know typically in a subdivision situation, open space may be intended for others to use within the subdivision. This subdivision, from day one, because of how it kind of evolved and came to the board, none of the front lots had any ability to have open space. That wasn't even a consideration. So, sort of consistent with that, we really didn't make provisions in these two additional lots to be distinctly different from the way the rest of the subdivision was approved. However, I was in the hopes that the board could sort of get comfortable with the notion that each of these two lots is big and by far larger than their minimum lot size. The larger of the two, in a lot of development worlds, the developer would have come to me and tried to pinch another lot out of it and get 3 instead of 2. So
Well, let me put it to rest here. I'm not comfortable with just giving a complete waiver of open space, but what I'd like to see is an indication of what kind of open space will be left when you come back with a final plan of construction.
And that would be areas of these two lots that are not to be developed in the future.
Exactly.
That'll be fine.
Exactly.
And what I think is going to be the most sensible thing for you folks and for Jonathan to proceed would be for us to clearly identify on these two lots a target building area, a target building window.
Yes.
I know on a lot of subdivisions, we only show setback lines from property lines. Certainly in the case of the larger lot, the one that has the longer driveway, I believe it's going to be fairly important to identify a target building area, particularly with regard to the DEP's review of that driveway. That'll help us also identify the areas within which we need to find the specimen trees versus the areas we don't. So let me endeavor to do that, Nina, between now and the next, or the final meeting, and we'll get those changes added to the plan, because I think that would clearly identify where open space would end up remaining.
Okay, well, what I'd like to say is that the open space requirement is sort of held in abeyance with the preliminary plan, and that the applicant will come back with an indication of open space when basically the final plan is done and construction sites identified.
Okay.
Okay? And I think that's what I have.
Okay, anybody else? If not, I'll open up the public hearing on this. If there's any public comment on this particular subdivision? Hearing none, I will close the public hearing. Now, this is a preliminary plan. Preliminary plan is not, it is closed by a letter from the chairman, or perhaps the vice chairman, since she knows more. But one of us should write a letter.
I've already
that-
started on the final, so.
Yeah, it's basically a letter that says, assuming we do approve this preliminary, it says the planning board has approved the preliminary, and here's what we expect to see in the final. Is that a good description of
That's
the
been the
letter? I've
that's been the
written
practice.
a number of them in the past.
Do you have some
Some
examples for me?
Yeah, I think
to-
I can find a couple
Yep.
samples.
Okay, all right.
Okay,
And
but I was
don't-
thinking since you're officially case manager and you're the vice chairman, it's fine if you send it. It just goes to type it up, get it to Lisa, and she'll make it an official paper, and then you may have to go in and sign it.
Okay,
Okay?
all right, just give me an example.
I
and I'll
shall
write it up.
give you an example. I may go home first. I don't think I have one
Okay.
easily accessible, but,
So we don't actually vote on this, we just?
well, no,
we do.
We have to vote on
we
it.
have to vote that
Oh, okay.
we think it looks good and they should proceed to final. So, someone would like
So
to move.
I'll make that
So
motion.
move.
Yeah.
Second. In favor? Okay, so,
All right, got you.
looks good, you can proceed to final.
Yeah.
Thank you, board members.
Okay, before you get to Hidden Pond, I have a question on the other one.
Okay.
Okay, we've seen no paperwork yet. so
Right,
unless-
because we didn't expect to come back to this meeting.
Okay,
I
so
didn't-
that's-
I probably should have been more clear with Lisa
Okay.
Harmon on that. in that
Okay,
regard.
so that is what I suspected.
So we would ask that we
When we get to
table-
item
we
3,
table
we will
that for
skip
the-
over it.
Okay.
Yes, yes,
All right.
for this evening anyway.
Yes,
I
okay.
have some counsel to provide for that client couple, and we'll come to some conclusions and we'll return.
Okay.
Okay, good, yeah.
Sounds good.
All right, okay, good.
All right. Now, meanwhile, we have 190803 Hidden Pond, Sebago Techniques authorized agent site plan review public hearing for revision to the previously approved plan. So, Mr. Doe will proceed. You've made some changes since you were here 2 weeks ago.
Yes.
about them.
For the record, Steve Doe from Sebago Technics. Also with me tonight is Ralph Austin. Last we met, there was a couple minor questions the board had, so I submitted a supplemental letter, and I'll just go over those briefly. The first one was the light fixture. We changed it to a fixture that's more down-directed. It's a sky, dark sky compliant fixture. And then the second item, which wasn't asked by the board, but in working with the interior designer and the architect, they made some changes to the elevations. They moved some of the elements around a little bit, nothing really major, but I did want to at least present it so you can at least see what they're doing. I know Nina had some questions about the windows and the bird. So the majority of the windows are double-hung windows. There are 2 windows on the back of the building that have mullions in them. They're fixed windows, no screens. I did talk to both the groundskeeper, has been there maybe 5 years, and also the person that's been there since day one. So we got 11 years plus of experience out there, and they haven't had any bird impacts that they're aware of on any of the buildings with the large windows.
They haven't seen any.
Well, there's some areas where the windows are right where it's very visible, there's a patio area, and they have never seen any. And that's where the big windows are, is on the event barn. All the cottages have the small windows. It's,
But sometimes you won't see them because squirrels and other predators run in and grab the dead birds down below. I've seen it happen.
yeah.
So. Just reminding you that we've lost a quarter of the birds. The last science, the Cornell study that was recent, we've lost a quarter of the birds. The total number of birds that we've had in the United States and Canada, and bird strikes are a big, big part of that.
Nope, I understand that. So. The other one is, you had asked for the previously approved grading and site plan, so I provided those to you. And then, as I mentioned at the last meeting, SW Cole is performing a hydrogeological assessment. That's still in the works. We don't have a report on that yet, but that's still ongoing. I have spoken with Ed Bassett, and he's contacted his neighbors so we can get access to their wells and septic fields. So that's an ongoing thing. We hope to have it, prior to the next meeting. That's all I had for new items. I know this is a public hearing. If you'd like, unless the board has questions, I can go through what the proposal is for the public.
I'm assuming, George, are you good so far?
I'm fine.
Go ahead.
Unless
Yeah,
someone
why
else
don't you
has
just review quickly for the...
Okay. So for the public, Hidden Pond was approved for, I think, Phase 1 was 26 cottages. They built all but 10 of those in the first phase. So what we're coming back for now is to construct those last 10 cottages. And we could have just come back and put the same cottages in without going through the planning board, but the applicant made some changes to the cottages and changes to the placement of those cottages. So we have to come back to the board. And the areas where they're doing it is, this is the main entrance road coming into the property. Are you folks interested in, I can move that so you can see. Yeah. So this is the main road where the sign is as you come in. This is what's called the farm. The cottages really currently start right about here and go into the property. There was 5 cottages located here, and then there was 5 cottages located over here. You probably can't see this really well, but what's in red is what was approved, and then the gray is the actual new cottage locations. I've got a larger plan for visibility of that. So this plan is the first 5 cottages. So Goose Rocks Road is in that direction, so you come in. This is where the farm is right now. This is the building that's existing there. So the orange are the new cottages. We're gonna come in with a driveway in through here, which will also serve as a fire lane. And then we have parking for these over here. So each cottage gets 2 parking spaces. This particular location already has existing wells that have been drilled back in 2007. There's a well here, and then there's a well over here. And so those will all be using the existing wells that are already there. The septic for this will actually be, there is a septic field existing at the farm, so these units will be pumped to that existing septic field. This is the second area. So the farm is down here. This is the existing fire pond that's out there. So we're gonna come in with a new road, which will have a loop road so fire trucks can circulate around there. And then we're placing these 5 cottages in the woods. We're gonna be drilling 2 new wells. There's a well here, and then there's a well in this location. And again, these units are hooked up to will be hooked up to the existing septic field. Other than that, I know we've been talking with the neighbor. He had some issues concerning buffering. Ed Bassett lives over here. We had a row of evergreens putting in there. We're going to put a fence on the development side of that to help buffer these units from his home. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions, or if you want to open it up for the public hearing.
Are you taking out any significant trees?
There's not a lot of significant trees on the property because this was an area that was burned over in the fire. There are 2 big trees. Essentially, there's one here and one there, 2 oak trees. We're taking the one down. We're going to try to retain the other one. Oaks don't like it when you mess with their roots really well. We're going to try to save it, but there's a chance that after it may die. But otherwise, there's not a lot of big trees out there.
Is there a plan to replace those trees somewhere else?
The whole site's wooded, and we're trying to save as many of the trees as we can.
Okay.
We're kind of working the cottages in the trees and not, wholesale clearing on there. The intent is that these are going to be like tree houses, so we really want to keep the trees around it. so.
So the 10 new cottages are going to be going on to the development that's already been in operation for 11 years using groundwater. So has anybody noticed any decrease in the elevation of the water table? I mean, is the water table holding up? How's that working out? Or any
Well,
monitoring
hopefully the
wells?
study will
Oh,
help with some of that.
That's what they're doing right now.
Yeah, there are some monitoring wells out there, but they've been looking more at nitrate levels.
Oh, yeah.
And
But
that's
not
been,
necessarily groundwater elevation.
not necessarily groundwater elevation.
But will you have that info?
That's why, kind of why we're doing this hydrogeologic study, because the neighbors were concerned about their wells.
Okay.
They've noticed levels in their pond going down. I mean, it's
Ah.
been a dry season, but still so that's part of the study that we're doing.
What's the elevation of this approximately above sea level? Approximately 10 feet, 20 feet?
56,
56, okay.
I think the low is like 48 in this
Okay.
area.
All right, that's good.
Yeah.
So original septic system?
We're going to be using the existing septic system that's out there. Let's take this one off. Thank you. There's several septic fields for this whole development, but these cottages go to a septic field that's located right here. That's where the farm is. And I was just looking at the nitrate analysis that we did when we first developed that, and the plume for that heads in this direction. And I was talking to Ed I think this morning. There's Ed's right here, and there's kind of a ridge line right here, kind of a grade break, watershed break, that this part of the site kind of drains in this direction, and then this all heads out and heads towards Goose Rocks Road. But yeah, these will be going to the existing septic field, and it was designed for these additional units.
Thank you.
So when you say you're testing for nitrate, you're actually testing for ammonia, right? Or is it nitrate? Because-
They basically take water samples and they test for everything that you would test for.
Because most of the influent stream is going to be ammonia. It has to go through a conversion process to go to nitrate. So if you find nitrates, that implies there's already some bacterial activity going on that's changing the influent waste stream.
But yeah, they're testing a whole slew. But if you were testing well water for that, they're testing all of that.
So I guess they must be testing oxygen levels as well?
I would assume so. I have to look at
It'd
the
be interesting to
results.
see the report, yeah. Take a look at
We
it.
do provide that to the town.
Oh, okay. Are you going to provide it to us?
I can.
I think it'd be interesting.
Yeah, I mean, if you're interested in one of the previous,
Okay.
previous reports, that have been supplied.
All right.
Essentially, whenever we get those come in, I mean, we're looking, since it was specifically related to nitrate levels, those are the numbers that we're looking for there. But yeah, I'm happy to provide a copy of the last one that we would have received.
I'll come get it.
Okay.
And just
Does
so you
anybody
know,
else want it?
we are providing
Yes.
a denitrification system as well for this septic
Can
system.
I comment on this?
Please.
I don't remember a lot about this, but I remember that it's a little tricky.
Into the mic.
Oh, it's a little tricky because the conversion process from ammonia to nitrate requires an active bacterial colony. And it takes a lot of oxygen and a lot of alkalinity because you're always trying to make acid, right? Nitric acid, and you want to make it nitrate instead of acidic. So
Right.
you want to keep the pH about 7. But then to go from nitrate to free ammonia, you has to still have a surplus of oxygen because it's an aerobic reaction, but it's a different bacterial colony that makes the conversion of nitrate to free nitrogen because you want that particular bacterial colony to use the oxygen in the nitrate as its primary source of oxygen. So so to me it's a little tricky, and it's a function of temperature, as I recall, alkalinity and oxygen levels. And so, of course, in this location, I mean, temperature, to make these reactions work, I think the temperature bounds, as I recall, are like 10 centigrade to maybe 50 centigrade. So it's the lower bound temperature that could be an issue. So when you're looking at this, you might might be interesting to see how you're going to control the process as well as monitor it to make it work. Also, well, sampling for the, to make sure it's working, as well as how to control the reactions. Well, how to control the factors that affect the reaction. So it'll be very interesting to see how you're going to do
Well, there is a system that we're actually purchasing. It's like a $35,000 system that's actually going to be installed to handle this. It's a proven system.
This like a black box? You
It's
install
it's
it?
a unit that's installed that goes into it. It's a proven system out there.
So you could let us take a look at that as well?
Yeah.
That'd be
Yep.
interesting, yeah.
Steve, I want to pull the package apart because it's distracting. Do we have a copy inside the application that shows the existing, the cottages that were existing originally approved and the overlay of where the current location's going to be?
Yes, you have this plan here
It's
in your
here?
package,
Okay,
yeah.
good enough, thank you.
I think it's like might be the first plan in the set.
Good.
So, this, back on the nitrate, so you're doing this because there's some problem with the?
Well, we've been testing since this system went in. We got monitoring wells. These two circles are monitoring wells because Cerise's well is over here and Bassett's well is in the same general area. So they were concerned during the original approval about their wells, which is a legit concern. So as part of the original approval, we installed these monitoring wells. So there's one here, and then there's one right at the property line. So we can monitor what the groundwater is doing as this septic field comes into, starts being used. And we test it twice a year. And by law, we can't exceed 10 milligram per liters at the property line. And during the peak season, we've been getting some like 6. So it's not 10, but once this thing comes into full use, we have a fear that it may get to 10. So we want to take care of that now before it even gets to that. And this denitrification system should be able to take it down. It's like guaranteed to be less than 10.
Okay.
So
great.
it's a good system, it's a proven system, and we just kind of do it for precautionary reasons, just to put it right in.
Okay, great.
And there's currently there is a pre-treatment system on this septic system already. With this new system, that one may come out because it may be redundant, but we got to do a little more exploration on that. So.
Okay.
Okay, now, is that, excuse me, that installation of that system and such things, that becomes part of your approval process for site plans, so not for this site plan, but for the building permits in the future? Is that the way
I
this
think,
is
yeah, it's going to have to be
intended
approved by
work?
Werner. And
Yeah, well, if it's part of the approval of, the site plan,
Yes.
then it'll be a condition.
So there'll be a condition that they install this
Absolutely.
denitrification system?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep,
Okay.
yep. And that'll be, it's as a separate component and, it's a separate permit,
Right.
that we do through the
And
subsurface waste
the
rules.
hydrological survey you just referred to that's in process, is
It's
that?
still in process, yeah, they're still working on that.
So is that something that we are expecting to see before we approve this plan? Or are you expecting that we approve this plan and that hydrological survey again goes into the Werner pile?
I would like the latter just because of the timing, but I know the neighbors and all may be concerned about it. I don't know if the board is, but assuming a favorable review of that or favorable report, I'm sure they're going to, if there's any concerns, they'll have recommendations in that. But again, my assumption right today is you're not approving this today. Hopefully by October 16th, if we're on the agenda again, hopefully we would have that report by then that we could present, to the town.
Okay, so in that case, what we would do, and Werner will correct me if I screw this one up again, as we did the last time that you were here, we would open up the public hearing but not close it until he comes back
Correct.
with that
Yep,
report on the
keep it
16th.
Keep it open so that you can continue to receive information. Yep.
Okay, so but we would also leave the public hearing open?
Correct, yes. Yep.
Okay, because that's what we messed up the last
Yeah.
time. I don't want to
Yeah.
mess it up again.
And we also plan on providing that report to Ed Bassett. He was the one that requested that, that some information about that. And he's been a good neighbor, we've been communicating back and forth, so.
Question for you, old versus new. Is it the same number of bedrooms?
Same number of bedrooms.
And how about square footage?
Square footage is the same. We can't go any larger than, I think it's 1,100 square
1,100
feet.
square feet.
And we can't, the septic system is kind of the limiting factor. We can't, it was designed for no more than 2 bedrooms. And we're staying with the 2 bedrooms out there.
Thank you.
Any more comments from the board? Well, I guess I will open up the public hearing at this point. So, any public wish to speak? Okay. Please do.
Never miss a chance.
Well,
Ed Bassett, 35 Oxbow Lane, Kennebunkport. I believe you have received a letter from me, or at least I think it's been forwarded to each of you. As the letter indicates, our main concern is the water and the waste. These are the 2 things that were the big issue the last time when the original plans went in. And it was rectified, it was taken care of for us, and we appreciated that. And now we're back again because this is a whole new section. And to be honest with you, 10 more residences going in there is going to put a heck of a drain on our aquifer system. So that's what our concern is, and that's why we were asking for the hydrologic study to be done to see if we can in some way determine what effect that's going to be. One of the people in our neighborhood has and don't ask me how this works because I don't know, but they have an indicator on their well as to the amount of water that is in it. And that is down beyond half at this point. So there has been a drain this summer because of the dryness that we've had. The pond in front of my house, one of you asked if there was any way to see it, just come to my house. The pond in the front is almost bone dry. It is a fire pond. It has a hydrant leading to it. You can see all the pipes going into the pond at this time. So there is a difference, and that's something that we can't control. So if we can in some way try to take care of that, that's what we want to do. I have to say, in all due respect and honesty, they have been a fantastic group to work with this year. We got together, we went through the plans, we did what we had to do, we talked about what we had to talk about. Everything went very, very smoothly, for which we are very happy. My letter indicated to you before that there were a number of things that we would like to have you look at, and they were based upon decisions made by a previous board and implemented when Plan Number 1 unit, or the first division, went into effect. Those we still would like to see in place. Basically, they are pretty much there, as far as I can see what Steve is told to me and what have you. So they've been working with us, and we are super happy that that's working that way. There is another family by the name of Ronins. I don't know if we received a letter from them or not. Their well is probably even, well, I know their well is closer to it than mine is. But we both have the septic systems there that we're concerned about. We both have wells there. The next people up, Rosati's, and they have a well too that's out in the back toward that property line. And of course, knowing where my house is, as he showed you before, my house is right there. So I get the benefit of this septic system here, and then the new pieces coming in here. And obviously, there's a reason for concern. So with your help, I hope you will abide by the requests that we've made, and I believe that the Hidden Pond Group is going to do that as well. So if you could make sure that hydrologic study is done and is acceptable, that would be a big help to us. Okay? Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else wish to speak? Okay, well, I am not going to close the public hearing at this point. What we're going to do is defer this until next week unless you wish to speak before we do.
Okay, I don't have any more comments, so.
So, at this point, we're going to
Make a motion
make
to
a motion
continue
to.
the public hearing to the next
continue-
meeting.
Continue the public hearing
Yeah.
until next week.
Ralph had a couple comments.
And Ralph has a couple comments first. Okay.
One quick question. Ralph Austin, also representing Hidden Pond. And this is a request I know the board has considered other projects in the past. Should the hydrogeological report come in acceptable, and the board does approve this at the next meeting, and obviously we don't know, but if they were, would it be possible also to have the findings read and approved that night as well?
Sure.
Because there's concern with the construction
Yeah,
season.
we may have to get, since George is not going to be here, we may have to reassign or
Shared responsibility.
shared responsibility on
I'll
this
write it
one,
there
and
to
since,
Okay, that's all right.
Thank you.
okay,
Okay.
and since
All
the McMahon is not happening,
So,
you can share with George.
I will, I'll be late. So I do have one, so this hydrogeologic survey, are you gonna identify the source of the groundwater? I mean, that could be a little tricky, but it might be interesting if, it seems like there's some concern that it's going down. Do you know where it's coming from?
They're gonna look at all that stuff. SW Cole is doing it. They've asked for all kinds of information from me.
Okay,
All the wells, well
Alright.
depths, all that stuff. They're looking at, they're doing a pretty thorough
okay.
investigation on
And
that.
you think that'll be available next time?
I'm hoping it is, yeah. That's my,
All
I
right.
call them every day.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
great, thank you.
Okay. So I would like a motion to continue the public hearing to the next time.
So moved.
So seconded.
Okay, in favor? All right, so we will continue this to the next time. Okay. Item 3 was the thing I briefly talked to Jim Logan about that shouldn't have gotten onto the agenda in the first place. So it's the continued review of the
Just mine or yours?
the Northwood Drive, the McMahon properties. So that leads us to item 190401, Mark Messer and Elizabeth Carlson, an initial site plan review to do road improvements on Ledge Road. So once again,
Good evening.
a
My
former
name-
member of our board comes in front
My
of
name
us.
is Mark Messer, for those of you who don't know. I trust that you all got my application. I did have a list of the items that are in the packet in the cover letter, so if you can check that with all the items. If you don't have anything, I have got extras right here. So basically, I assume you all read it, I won't go through everything. I want to build a house at the end of the road. The town requires that I increase the width of the road in order to do that. So officially, I'm here for that purpose. However, I'm sure, as you saw from my application, that I would like to keep it just the way it is. So that's a summary of my application. And these are my neighbors, the Wewells, who I referenced in the
Yes, I saw that.
Well, I have a couple of questions for you, Mark.
Sure, certainly.
Okay. You provided 2 deeds here, one from 1996, which conveys the property to you and Elizabeth. But there's also one in 2007 in which you're granting, you and
Right.
Elizabeth grant specifically to Elizabeth. Is that the
Right.
same property?
That's the property that's currently the Sharps that has the other developed lot. The rest of the property is still one lot. It's not deeded out yet.
So,
That shares the driveway. So I put that in because that house shares the driveway. The Sharps house.
the Sharps house, okay.
So that, the one that Beth and I deeded to Beth was pre-sale.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure that you're representing for you and Elizabeth the property you want to build on.
Yes.
Okay. The other thing you mentioned is that the Sharps, and possibly the Wewells, am I pronouncing that right?
Yeah.
Okay. Have some rights as to the road. And my question is, maybe it's for Warner, do we need authorization, depending on the rights, do we need authorization from those people for Mark to represent a change to the road?
I don't believe they have ownership. I
Okay,
don't
it's
believe they
just
have
an
ownership. I
easement?
think it's just that they have an easement
Easement.
to it.
That's what I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. And it is just an easement?
A right-of-way, yes.
Okay.
And
Okay.
for utilities.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure the right authorizations were
Okay.
in there correctly. So. Does this require an MDEP permit?
No.
No. Okay.
And
I talked to them on the phone. They said no. I talked to the Lower Village surveyors who do wetlands delineation. They said no.
No? Okay. Where is the hammerhead actually going? That you,
There's no hammerhead on my plan. You're a
Okay.
planning board with a small p and a small b for this, so I'm giving it to you guys. There's no hammerhead on the plan. All I have to do per the ordinance is widen it.
okay.
so, Mark,
The hammerhead was the suggestion of the fire.
Right.
right, the fire chief, John
Right.
Effort. So, just help me out. Are you looking, because you said you want to leave it exactly like it is. It's 12 feet wide, right?
With shoulders, so another 4 feet on each side of shoulder.
Okay. 4, 12, 13, 14, 15. Okay. What do you think of John Everett's suggestions?
The idea of a hammerhead would be fine. I mean, this board has granted roads with a lower width than that's required with a hammerhead to kind of compensate for that. So
Right.
I'd be fine with a hammerhead or circle thing at the end.
Okay,
And that was, Werner met with me, and he said the same thing. He came out to the site, and he said a hammerhead would be perfectly fine for him.
And where would it be?
At the very end of the road.
So this,
Yes, it's not something that's shown on the plan.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
But I think what, and I don't want to speak for Mark, but I think, what you were saying is that, at the end of this road, you'd provide a hammerhead.
Sure.
On your property as
Right.
part of your driveway
Yes.
construction.
Yep, exactly. All that's required by the ordinance is widening it to 20 feet. So
okay, and,
there's no requirement for a hammerhead.
okay.
That's kind of like a negotiable type thing.
Right. See, 12, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70. So when you have the 4 on either side, is that, you've still got a 12-foot road, right?
Oh, yes, yes.
so the drawing that Leon did says 20-foot wide gravel drive.
Right, that's officially what I'm applying for. But I'm asking you to
You don't want that.
amend that. Right.
Okay, so this is just a theoretical drawing if you had to go to the 20
Absolutely.
feet
Yes.
with 4 foot
And it
on
can,
each
it
side.
can always go less. I can always do another site plan.
Right, because John Everett is, in that third paragraph, did a great job in talking about, putting the hammerhead past the Sharp property driveway at 18 Ledge Road, then from 30 feet beyond the hammerhead towards your new residence, the road can be reduced to at least 12 feet wide.
Kept at 12 feet.
Kept. Yeah, reduced, okay. As we discussed, the turnaround needs to be at least 20 feet wide and 30 deep. And I read where you said you'd be happy to to restrict that deed to no more homes, right?
I did.
In your letter, I think you said that.
I mean,
Oh, to
yes.
make sure,
I would do that. I would, because that last lot is over 3 acres, and it's room for 2 building sites. I mean, I guess if I had to widen it to 20, I mean, maybe to kind of make up for it, I would think about dividing it into 2.
I see what you're saying.
But, just to kind of make up for
Okay,
that cost,
that's-
but
'cause
I
he
would
has that-
absolutely,
He has that in there.
I would absolutely put that in the deed, that it would never be subdivided.
Okay, yeah, because that last paragraph, the reduced width from the hammerhead to your residence is allowed only if the rest of the property is deed restricted against more dwellings being built.
I could do that. That was a good idea.
Right, yeah, 'cause
I mean, he
thought
and I had a
was-
long talk, and I thought
He
that
was
was
very
a
fair, I mean.
reasonable, yeah, the hammerhead and the thing would be great.
So I was just looking at your, Mark, I was looking at your application there. And on the second page, it talks about there are 4 lots who currently have the right, title, or interest in the road. So that implies that's the origin of the 20-foot width, right? Because you have 4 lots.
Yes, exactly.
So you would have, so you're gonna revise this to
There's
say
3 now, there's 3 now, there will be 4.
Oh. So you actually do need a 20-foot wide portion.
That's why I'm here.
Okay, all right, okay. So.
This is a
How-
real important one. This is
However, the
Oh, the fire chief?
saying that he'd be
Alright.
allowed to keep the 12.
planning board,
Oh, I got you.
But put it, hammerhead.
the planning board has the authority to keep it the way it is.
All right.
For environmental or one other reason, I forget which one it is.
And
With the
For environmental concerns, or, and
the
there's one other.
wetland on either side.
Yeah,
I mean, if you had to widen it at that point, it would absolutely hurt that.
yeah, yeah, oh, yeah.
That's your picture of the wetlands.
That's one of them, yeah, it's dry now, it's been dry, but it's usually standing water throughout the year,
Yep.
or ice.
Okay, interesting, okay. So at the very least, you'd want to revise this to show exactly what portion was 20, 16, and 12, right? Is that the idea?
I'm sorry?
So your map here of your road, that's your existing road?
No,
Oh, it's not the existing road.
that's a application
20-foot.
site plan.
Okay, I know,
Road
but
to the
that's,
additional
but
line.
that's the route of your road?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so, based on what the fire chief said.
Yep.
So you would want to revise this to show which portion was 20, 16, or 12?
Right,
Okay,
exactly.
all right,
Right,
okay,
I'm-
yeah, all right,
I
okay.
expect he doesn't
That
want to pay Leon to redo it
Right.
without knowing that we might have a chance of approving it.
I got you, okay. Okay, gotcha. Good, all right, okay,
Sounds familiar from last week with-
yeah,
with Jim.
all right, okay.
I feel 12 feet is adequate. It's, 2 trucks can pass. I mean, I think for the, if you balance the safety of 2 vehicles not scratching each other or whatever with the environment, I think the 12-foot road, it's a very peaceful-looking road, which is why I included the photograph. Most of it has underground power.
So would you have to move the underground power if you were to widen?
I don't know how that would,
I don't,
I,
I don't think you would have to,
No,
but,
no, I wouldn't expect that you would have to relocate
No.
utilities. Not unless you have a transformer or something that's in the way.
I
but
don't
it
know.
doesn't look like it's treed right up to that 12-foot width. It looks like there are places where you could already pass. I could see going with this if you had the hammerhead where a fire truck could turn around,
Right.
And the deed restriction.
and the deed
And the deed
restriction.
Yeah. I'm totally fine with that, it's a reasonable,
So, what, how do we proceed then? Do we take a sense of the board that we would approve it if it were that way?
I
And
would.
then-
I would.
Then have him.
With the hammerhead and with the
The deed
reduction.
restriction.
Deed
With the-
restriction.
With the deed restrictions, which obviously that you may not get, we know that to get a building permit, you have to
That
get
last
the-
lot
the-
is, it's been surveyed, there's a written description of it by Leon,
Yeah,
and he could easily add a sentence or whatever about the deed restriction, and then I could give it and have it taken to Alfred for it to be deeded.
okay.
Okay.
So.
But it's not
I
now,
think,
it's not deeded now.
So just to be clear, is it is the board requesting that the recommendations of the fire chief be followed directly as far as, because there's a couple of different widths here, and I think that Mark is asking something somewhat different than that.
Yeah.
You know, he's
Yes.
asking for 12 feet overall width, and it sounds like is agreeable to the hammerhead and the deed restriction. The chief is suggesting something somewhat different than that, you know, which is kind of a mix of
Where is the,
of 16, which is 16 to a certain point, then 12. So
where-
I just
where
want to
is
be
the-
clear so
where
that
is
he
30
knows.
feet above
I
the sharp
I
driveway
heard them
show up
clearly.
on this?
I heard them clearly. I'm not confused by what they're thinking.
Okay.
So where is he proposing the hammerhead?
At the very end, if I could, let me show you over there?
Yeah, please.
Like this type of thing right here.
Okay. Now.
On
what
that
he-
lot.
Okay. And that's, where is the Sharp property?
Right here, this whole lot right here.
Oh, okay, fine. Okay. Oh, yeah, it says Sharp. Look at that. Okay. Okay, now he's saying 16 feet and you're saying 12. Right? His letters, I mean, would say he wanted it to be a 16-foot road all the way up there.
Except for well, he's okay with 12 at the very end, from the Sharp house to the lot.
Right, yep.
From
Road
3
can be
feet
reduced
beyond the
to at
hammerhead.
least 12 feet wide.
Yeah. Okay. So you would get Leon to write up, specify what he says here, or you would do something different? He would do
Different.
all 12?
I would do, keep it the way it is. I would add a hammerhead at the end, sufficient, per the chief's letter, that size. And I would deed it, it would run with the land, that it would never be divided. It's beautiful. That last lot also has wetlands,
Yep.
but there's certainly enough room for 2 houses, and I would certainly deed it forever to stay at 3 point whatever acres.
Yep. Okay, so the difference from what the chief said is that he only wants the 12 feet beyond the hammerhead, and you're saying you want to keep it the way it is?
Yeah. That's my application.
Do you think he would be amenable to that?
I don't know, this is his first year here, I don't know.
Because basically what you're asking for is sort of a waiver from what the first findings of fact were.
Or we can see it as starting new.
There may be a
The
special.
ordinance does say that the planning board has the right to
Yes.
look at the width in terms of environment and one other reason, I forget which it is. 10.6 something.
Maybe, Mark, you can, because in your letter to each of us, you really emphasize the environmental impact of the widening, you know, with again, showing, you know, one of these, and there's several.
Mm-hmm.
Can you just maybe elaborate on, build your case, if you want 12 feet, how that would help the environment?
Yeah, absolutely, and, oops, pick the scab here. Nina was talking earlier about the birds. There are these long-legged birds. I don't know what they're called. We see them there. There's been a hawk there for years and years and years. The other day I saw the biggest frog I've ever seen. Last week it was about this big. For this time of year, I thought that was a little strange, but it's there's a lot of wildlife along that road in the woods, and we hear certain deer. We hear there was a fox sleeping on the side of that road the other day, sleeping like right at sunset. So besides the wetlands, there are like standing wetlands like right on the edge of the road. There's also a lot of trees. There's a lot of regular grass that would have to be impacted. It's like an 800-foot long road, so.
That's big.
So, I guess one of my concerns would be the fire chief is the expert in terms of fire prevention, in terms of loss control. So if we voted for something that was different from what his recommendations are, I'm a little concerned about the impact, see? So I think it'd be interesting to confirm that the fire chief would be okay with some kind of 12-foot width. And what comes to mind is, you know, you have sort of three areas on here. The entrance area, then this middle bit, and then the final bit. So would you need some passing places? Because, you know, if you have basically a 12-foot wide road is a single lane road, but there's a potential for traffic. I know it's not likely, but it's gonna happen at some point. So do you need like a little passing point where one car can pull over?
That's a good idea.
Where one car could pull over while one passes, and that might eliminate the need for the
Right.
whole width, but it would still
keep it
facilitate
natural.
traffic.
That's a good idea.
And-
Along with a
That's a great
hammerhead.
idea.
Well, and along with the hammerhead, yes, the hammerhead is implied.
Would that be different than the fire chief's report as well?
Well, but still, we still need to get the fire chief on board. I don't want to,
Well, what you need to do is keep a clear area. Propose a couple of clear areas along the road that you already have.
Right.
To maintain it. I have an 800-foot drive, and it's about 12 feet. But there are a couple of places where, you know, we can pass the UPS truck when he's coming in, you know?
there you go.
And that's been maintained over the years. There are areas that
Yeah.
work for that.
But you-
And
but could
maybe
you-
if you proposed keeping a couple little areas where cars could pass and the hammerhead and the restriction, the fire chief would come on board.
Sure.
Yeah, good. Yeah. Some designated passing places.
Yeah,
Could be
that's a good idea.
Yeah.
And I can think of one spot where that'd be perfect for that.
Okay, well, I think that I'd feel more comfortable about that idea.
Yeah.
Okay, so now what?
The other part of that was, for, after construction, the deal with the Sharps is that I mean, it's not even a handshake, it's just, I told them I would do it, that I would redo the whole surface of the road after all the construction vehicles have gone in and out for several months. And so if I could do maybe like the pull-off area and the hammerhead after the construction, I don't know if you saw that in the application, the Sharps would really appreciate that too. Danielle, well, Thad's in Virginia, but Danielle's here, and she would really appreciate that too, and I was talking to her.
I saw that, right. That was that request.
I mean, that's not my primary
Well, I don't
request.
think that has to be part of the application, unless you wanted to. I think a gravel road is acceptable. You know-
What would the board approve here? Would they approve a 20-foot road that wouldn't be enforced? Or would they approve a waiver to the 20-foot, approve a waiver based on modification of a current road?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, you'd be looking to cite, you know, the provisions in
Yep.
6.14, you know, you'd have to state your reasons. I would expect that, that Mark would return with a, with a different plan, or a modified plan that shows what was agreed to. And then I think you all could certainly entertain
Right. Do we need to get,
the
what do we-
timing, the
sorry.
timing questions.
right, the timing questions would be, do we need to get the fire chief to be on board with Mark's final solution?
Right.
And it doesn't have, and wouldn't necessarily be fully writing, it could be, as Jim Logan referred to it, a cartoon markup of this to show where you're gonna be 12 feet wide and where you're gonna put in the hammerhead, and show him that and see if he will agree to that. Then we'll apparently, I think that I get the sense of the board that we will also agree with it.
Right.
But if he says, no way, and throws you out, we may have to do the same. So I think just a cartoon markup is the first step.
And the code enforcement officer didn't have any objections to it.
I mean, it's, it's within your scope of authority, to be able to recognize, and approve this type of recommendation. I don't have any particular objections to it. But understanding, the reason why we, put in a private road standard to begin with, was to essentially address fire access issues, which is why we have folks, get a review and recommendation from the chief.
The other interesting aspect is that the last time in 2006, it was a vote of 3-2 in favor of it. So it was not a
Yeah.
universal agreement to do it even back then.
Right.
I have one last question.
Sure.
Can the Sharps divide their property, and if so, what would happen then?
I don't know if they can or not. I think
I
they
don't
probably
think,
can.
I don't think I saw anything in the
No.
deed to restrict them.
No,
Then,
then they would have to address the road.
yes.
It would be their interest. But I'm willing to do that with that 3-acre plus lot at the end,
Okay.
which I think is big.
Not
So-
in terms of wildlife.
No, but that's why I want to do it. I mean, because we're going to live there, it's a beautiful 3+ acre lot I like to keep it that way. So it's not hard to.
Okay, so it sounds like what we're asking is for you to put down, to do at least a cartoon markup of what you want, rather than getting it redrawn
Okay.
by Leon, for starters anyway. I think ultimately, we would probably want the final drawing, right?
Right, yeah. I would think you would want it.
Ultimately, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but if you're gonna ask the fire chief, you could, get a crayon and mark it up. And if
Do
he
you want me to
says-
take yours so I can do that on, or?
You can take one copy. I mean, you don't have a copy?
I do have a couple, but
You can take mine. I don't.
if I want, okay.
It's fine. I'm not going to be the
No, I think what
case
you need to
manager.
do
I think
is,
my friend over here is going to be the case manager. So,
It's funny how that works.
funny how that works. You show up after a couple of weeks, take one time off and.
Right. Friends.
Okay, so I guess we will be continuing additional review, so I guess I need a motion to that effect.
I'll make a motion to continue initial review while Mark checks with the fire chief with a marked up copy, as per what we've discussed tonight.
And the
And
deed
if he
restriction.
loves it to pieces, you can go start getting the real one. And then, as far as, if what, the next review, it would be whenever you have stuff ready, a week ahead. which might not be the October 17th. But,
I'm sorry?
Well,
The next-
we need a public hearing,
yeah,
so
well,
he's,
it won't be a public hearing yet. though.
Right.
We're still continuing initial review.
right.
For your next meeting.
So if you could get it done,
If you
so
can get it done and get the fire chief agreeing with it, then we can approve the thing.
So mark it up, talk to the fire chief?
Yes,
Okay.
and then hopefully come back in 2 weeks with
That,
something we can approve.
okay.
Okay. So, we need a motion
I will
to that
second
effect. You
Deanna's
had that,
motion.
that was your motion.
That was
Okay,
my
and he
motion. We need a
seconded it,
second.
and we're all in favor, I bet.
Yeah.
okay.
Okay, thank you, Mark.
Thank
Good to
you.
See you again.
All righty.
Did you point out a case manager for that one, Tom?
I did,
I have-
Scott.
Scott, okay.
I just
thanks.
patted his shoulder, but
Okay,
yes.
thank you.
Okay, I will entertain one more motion, and it's only 10 after 8.
Go for it, Larry.
Move to adjourn.
I'll second that motion.
In favor?
Excellent.
Thank you very much. We're done.